This is uh, this is the webinar organized by the European Action Coalition for the Right to Housing and to the City. And we are here today to discuss rent strikes. Rent strikes are a powerful tool in an arsenal of tenant unions. So they can be used to gain some serious influence over landlords. And we have speakers today who will talk about why rent strikes, why now, how they have been used historically, and what comes next. So please, if you can introduce yourselves, Marie, Pablo, and Jack.
I will start. I'm Mari from Sindicat de Llogateres, the Tenants Union in Catalonia. And well, I'm from the Barcelona section, but that's it.
Hi, everyone. I'm Pablo. I'm from the Madrid Tenants Union. I've been a member for 4 years now. And the union was set up in 2017, same year as the Catalonia Tenants Union.
Hi everyone, I'm Jack. I'm from the Community Action Tenants Union in Ireland. I've been a member for almost about a year and a half now, and CATU started in 2019.
Thank you all. Let's start with political context. I would really like to know what are the conditions for a rent strike to occur, to have sense, to make sense, and why are you running rent strikes now? Pablo?
I'll go first, yeah, and then you guys can complement. So basically, I mean, just to give you a brief context of the Spanish situation, obviously, probably you all know the mortgage crisis that we had, and there's still a lot of hangover from that. Obviously, in the positive side, there's always been a very strong housing movement since that time, since 2009, where the platform of people affected by mortgages started. And then the tenants union picked up from that when we saw that, you know, the crisis was moving, or the focus was moving from mortgages to rents. After that happened, all those evictions from mortgage evictions turned into rental units. And we saw kind of an increase of these investment funds and also letting agencies, which is how small landlords organize, kind of becoming more present in Spain. And this has meant that in the last 10 years, the people who rent have increased a lot. Now they represent over 20% of the population when they used to be less than 10. And the prices have gone up over 60% in the last 10 years, right? And in some specific areas and specific cities like Madrid and Barcelona, even more. And during this time, this has happened, not obviously because of natural reasons, but because the governments have clearly legislated in favor of the landlords, and any measures that they've taken have been very minimal or cosmetic, in the sense that they haven't really meant an improvement in tenant living conditions, especially in the price situations. So the government passed the housing law in 2023, which tried to implement some sort of rent control, but it didn't really work out, in the sense that the autonomous region had to decide whether to apply it or not. And also, it didn't really put down the rents. It only froze the rents in places where it was implemented, like Catalonia. Mari can maybe share more details about this. And then in last September of 2024, we were the tenants union were pushing for more regulation around short-term rentals, right? Because this housing law that had passed in 2023 didn't cover short-term rentals. So we saw that a lot of landlords were kind of trying to evade or escape any of the little regulations that this law had given us through putting the apartments on short-term rentals. So these are rentals that are under a year, usually 9 months of duration, right? So they can put up the rents every 9 months. We saw that this was a climate when we were pushing for this regulation that we needed to cover, you know, one of the big loopholes of this housing law. In September, the regulation didn't pass. And it was a moment where I think, you know, we saw people were definitely fed up with politics and politicians, not just because of this specific context of this regulation, but this more generally, more broadly. And we at least see that this is one of the reasons why the extreme right has been growing everywhere. People are completely fed up of the situation. They feel completely disempowered, and we are too. We are completely fed up at the union, right? So we started having this messaging more focused on, we believe that the time of politicians has ended, that it's time to take matters by our own hands and recuperate this sense of power and agency that I think a lot of people, a lot of tenants in particular, feel that they don't have, right? We don't have control over our own houses, and that can feel really disempowering. So we thought that, we need to take back some of those lessons from the labor movement of the early 20th century. Strikes are the ways that we managed to earn a lot of our previous rights, like the 8-hour work week in Spain. In 1931, there was a 90,000 strong rent strike in Barcelona, where prices were put down 50%. So we realized that even though the rent strike is not currently legal in Spain per se, we think it's a legitimate tool that we need to kind of bring back and to create really a political crisis, not wait for a crisis to hit us, but create that crisis in a kind of more offensive, proactive way. And plus, we are already in a situation of constant crisis and survival mode, a lot of tenants in Spain. So we believe we deserve better lives. And in that sense, the rent strike has been something that has started maybe more of a campaign and a kind of trying to bring back the tool. I mean, we'll talk later about specific examples of how we're kind of rolling it out. But this is kind of the analysis maybe more broadly of what was the political context and why we thought we needed to bring back this very important tool in this specific moment.
Yeah, thank you. Mari, would you add something about Barcelona case or Catalonian case?
A second. Sorry. Yes, of course, all of that Pablo said applies to our territory as we are inside Spain too, but we have a few particularities. One of them is that in Catalonia in 2020, during the pandemic, we had already managed to get a law that put a cap to renting in a similar manner than the actual law does, with an index of pricing that had to be consulted, and the price couldn't be higher than this index or the previous contract. It's exactly the same, and we managed to put this law into motion and to work on it, and it was more or less working with all the flaws that it had. But then the Spanish court said that Catalonia couldn't do this on their own, that this was competency of the central government, and they took our law down and said, don't worry, we are going to do a better one, much better than yours for everybody. Then they presented something that was more or less the same. It only had a pair of things that were slightly better. One of them is that we are not now, we don't have now to pay the fees for the real estate agents when we sign a contract. That it's a very big thing, and this is of application in all the Spanish state, and it's very good. But the rest of the law is very similar, and they said that, well, it has to be applied if the autonomous community wants it to be applied. So this law that it was supposed to be better, it's in the hands of each community to say if they want to apply it. Of course, Catalonia already had an index, already had a series of cities that are declared as tensed places, because you can say that this city or this neighborhood, it's a tensioned space, and this law applies in here, but not in other places. Entering into the law would be too complicated. But the fact is that we managed to get this put on in Catalonia, but it was like 4 years after our law. So we lost 4 years. And in these 4 years, the prices had gone very, very high. And as Pablo said, the big flaw in the actual law, in the law that we have now, is the short-term regulation and the room regulation. The co-living situation in Barcelona right now, aside from the short term, is very problematic, because not only is not regulated and they can put the prices they want for just one room. The one room maybe can cost 750 euros, just the room, but they are also destroying apartments that maybe are 100 years old to turn them into a small rooms units so they can make these co-living spaces. And as Pablo said, we tried to push regulation on all of this, along with Sindicato de Inquilinas and other people from the housing movement, and it was turned down. And this turning down also came in a moment when Barcelona was having big demonstrations against touristification this past summer. And we also had an event that was the America's Cup, that was supposedly a big thing for the city, and it was just a thing for the rich people to come and colonize our city. So the same day that Madrid was having their big demonstration, the 13th of October, we were having a demonstration in Barcelona against Copa America and against touristification, against this city model that only preys on people. And after that, and after happening what happened in Madrid, we were told in Barcelona by people that was inside their movement that we needed to replicate what Madrid had done. So we worked on the 23rd of November. There was a massive demonstration in Barcelona too. And the main, aside from a rent strike, that was the main cry from everyone, to ask for a big rent strike, because as Pablo said, we are fed up. Our demands were to lower the rent at least 50% of the actual prices of the prices we have now, to control the rent, the sales to all these speculative funds. So yes, we had these demands, and this is on the streets. So we are there now.
Nice, thank you. Basically, you have reasons to organize rent strikes. Jack, your union isn't organizing a rent strike now, right?
No, we're not good. We're not good enough
one
yet.
very big one in Ireland in the 70s, right? Would
Yeah.
you say it was like? Do you see some similarities or dissimilarities? What would you say about that?
I think there's definitely similarities in terms of the rent being too high, conditions of the housing being worsened, and rent being increased kind of by the governments and the state's decisions, really, and through political decisions done by the Irish state and in the 70s, and now again in Catalonia and Spain, in the modern day. There's something that might be a bit or something might be similar as well, as like when the rent strike started in Ireland. There was already a lot of organizations set up across the country. So it was completely, there was organization, like there was tenants associations, they were called, so small little groups in all of the towns and the cities across the country that were set up to create one big national organization. So maybe there's some similarities there, in like in a bigger organization being formed out of all the small ones that are, well, small in quotation marks, but the smaller ones that are existing in Spain right now.
Thank you. And I wanted to touch upon one more thing that Pablo, you said, but I think it is common in all these contexts, because to organize a rent strike, you probably have to be disillusioned with politicians and politics. You don't jump right into it. You have to first be really pissed off, right? So you say that people are disillusioned with politics, disappointed in politicians, but tenant unions are political organizations, right? You have your politics. So how would you, what would you say your politics are here? And how does they differ from mainstream politics?
Mm-hmm. I think, yeah, obviously I was referring to more institutional politics, right? Where we usually put a lot of our demands, a lot of our hopes for change. I think, you know, something that we've seen very important in Madrid, and I think Mari can complement, is like we need very strong institutions outside of the kind of electoral politics realms, because it's only when we have those strong institutions outside that we can actually make those things happen, right? So, for example, to give an example, you know, the rent strike is something that we had been debating internally in the Madrid Tenants Union a year before we put it out in this big demo in October, and we used it in a specific time, right? So also having like an independent organization that has resources, that has a structure that can allow you to have your own long-term strategy also means that you can, you know, have these debates and think, okay, when is it a good time, a good political time to maybe try and bring this tool back, right? So we had been having these debates for 2 years, and the rent strike tool had already been discussed. Obviously, it's not something that you can just say and it will happen immediately. There's a lot of work to be done, but finding the right time to put that out, and also a time when I think, you know, people will take that up, right? People will understand that why the strike is necessary now. So I think we have to use those political times, you know, those electoral institutional political times, but also to our advantage, right? Not just demanding things, but also saying, when can we use like specific laws not being passed, like was the case in Spain, to bring power to us, right? We need to always be thinking on how can we accumulate more power outside of those institutions as well.
So you would suggest by building our own institutions. Yeah, thank you. So let's go to the second section of today's discussion. I wanted to ask you about like some real case studies, some real cases of rent strikes that were organized maybe before, and how did they connect to your current rent strikes? So maybe you can share specific cases when it was successful, or maybe no. When it was a tactic, what was the goal, and yeah, what was the results? Whoever want to start, Marie, maybe?
Well, I can maybe start with some examples that maybe when we were applying them, we were not thinking them in the terms of a rent strike, but we have this strategy since the beginning that we call "anskedem," that means we stay. And it's a strategy where the tenant, when it's going to be evicted, decides, or when it's going, or they're going to raise their rent or whatever, it's the problem, they decide to stay until there's a legal paper, and then some. And they stay paying what they think it's the correct quantity. And in fact, it's a way of making a partial strike. We never mention it like that, maybe because people would get scared if you tell them you're going to make a partial strike. But if you tell them you're going to pay what you think it's fair, it's easier for people to understand. But it's kind, and it was our first strategy, and it's been working for these past 8 years. And from that, it's where we learned enough to start going from individual cases to organizing blocks, to have the real power to be able to do a complete rent strike. And then the other thing that happened, and we did this in all Spain, was that during the pandemics, there was a big gap in the protection laws that the government put in motion regarding tenancy. There was nothing to protect the tenants if they couldn't pay. It was like, you can ask your landlord if they want to not get your money while you don't have a job and you can go out your house. But if the landlord say no, you had to pay anyway. So we organized all Spain together to make some kind of rent strike, but it was more a protection that, okay, a lot of people is not going to be able to pay. So if we frame it as a rent strike, we can manage to get some move from the politicians, and also these people will not feel so alone because they were doing this with a lot of people. And it maybe didn't work as well as we would have loved, but it managed to to make the government to make some moves in that direction, and we learned a lot. We learned a lot about organizing this kind of things. So as examples, previous examples, we have that. And then for what we are going to start in this 1st of April with La Caixa, I will try to be very, very quick, because we have organized around Catalonia a lot of blocks that are public housing, or were public housing. The thing in Catalonia, and I think in Spain it's exactly the same, is that public housing, when some years have passed, it loses the protection of being public housing, and it turns into private housing. So if you are living there because you bought it, you can sell it at a very high price and you win money with this public housing that you won in a contest. And if you are a landlord of a public housing, you can raise the prices you want, you can expel the person and sell this property, etc. And this public housing was managed by La Caixa. La Caixa, it's one of the biggest landlords in Catalonia, and it's the biggest bank in Catalonia. And the thing is that they have this social fund, and they operate under this social fund with this public housing, and they sell it like they are the social entity. We are a bank, but we are also so close. Come talk to us. But they operate as a bad landlord. They don't have this the housing well maintained. They make you pay fees that you shouldn't pay, etc. They have all the malpractices you can think of. They have them. And also they are profiting from public money. So we started to organize these people some years ago, just to see how it felt and to see what problems did they have, how we could tackle this. And after this 23rd of November, some of these blocks started to have assemblies and vote that they wanted to go on a strike. They say we can go on a strike against La Caixa. And that's where we are going to start. It's been a long process, but on the 1st of April, they will launch their strike, and we will see how it goes.
Fingers crossed. Pablo, would you like to add something about your union's experience?
Yeah, I mean, basically where we're at now, similar to Barcelona, I mean, our reflection is that we need many different and concrete examples to socially legitimize the tool of the strike, and also to show people that it can lead to victories, right? So when we show this, then more people will be willing to join in a kind of longer horizon of a more general strike. So we're starting to organize. I mean, we've already started organizing a strike, partial rent strike against Nestar. Nestar is another institutional big landlord in Spain. They have thousands of units, and basically in their contracts they charge tenants for fees that the landlord should be paying, like property tax, non-payment insurance, things like this, that actually there's already a court sentence in Barcelona that has declared this fees illegal, right? So they're illegal, but because the landlord has way more power, obviously they force tenants to sign these leases with this fees. So it's been a slow work of organizing, going to door, talking to people, telling them, you know, are you paying these fees? Do you think you should be paying these fees? Don't you think this is unfair? And then trying to get everyone on board to basically stop paying those fees. Those fees can represent about 100 to 150 euros a month out of a rent that is usually 600 to 800. So it's a significant amount for a lot of people for the day-to-day. And we're already seeing that it's working, because the landlord is actually not brave enough to evict people for this non-payment, because they're not stopping to pay rent, they're not paying the specific fees, and they know it's illegal. So we already, you know, people are already kind of seeing the power of taking this action. But apart from this one, which already has around 900 tenants in Madrid organized, so not paying these fees, we are trying to get more strikes happening. So for different reasons, be it like repairs, obviously repairs and maintenance are a big issue, and we think, you know, rent strikes are an obvious tool to use here, and it's been used historically in other countries like the US. But also things like going against specific landlords for their malpractices, like Mari was saying with the Caixa. You know, we know a landlord maybe it's a little short on money because they have a mortgage. Maybe a few months rent strike can really hurt them, and you know, they can really put them at the negotiating table. And also, obviously, as we get rolling with hopefully more and more small strikes, different types, different landlords, trying to walk towards what would be a more general rent strike in the horizon, that we don't have a date, obviously, because this is something that you have to build towards, but something that really pushes down the rents or forces this kind of political crisis that I was talking about before, that makes, you know, institutions say, okay, we have to act because people are disobeying, you know, in massive parts. So we're already also talking, both Catalonia and Madrid, with labor unions, to see whether in this horizon it could be together a rent and labor strike at the same time. So that would be kind of a powerful also show of force, where labor unions join tenants unions to show that, you know, the prices are too high. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That would be amazing. And Jack, tell us about, like, we hear a lot about what's going on right now,
Yeah.
but you have a very, very exciting historical example of a rent strike. What
Yeah.
were the demands? What were the outcomes? How many people were there striking? Tell us about it.
Well, yes. So Pablo, Marie, thanks for sharing that. That's so exciting. What's going on there? So I'm just pulling something up here now. 2 seconds. Sorry. Yes. So in Ireland in the 1960s, lots of people were doing rent strikes, kind of on it, like in small groups, kind of similar to what seems to be going on right now anyway, starting off in Spain, and eventually just kind of gained momentum, and it did become a general strike. Now, it wasn't a general strike of all the tenants in the country, but the majority of tenants were in council housing, or housing provided by the government, and people paid rent for that. There were 350,000 tenants in Ireland, a country of 4 million at the time, in protest against rent increases, a new rent system coming in, bad housing conditions, but also a lack of facilities in the community, like doctors and shops and things like that. So yeah, there's a lot of anger in the country, similar to how it is now in Ireland, but also in Spain and across several countries across the world, and Catalonia. And the rent strikes began around March 1970. So all these, like I said earlier, small tenants associations came together to form one national organization called the National Association of Tenants Organizations, or NATO for short, not like the North Atlantic Trade Organization. I think that's that. And it had a general secretary, so it was a hierarchical structure. But the democracy came and decisions came from public meetings on the ground, where tenants made decisions about how their tenants organization was going to go forward. Were they going to stay with the rent strike, which started in March of 1970, or going to quit it? So tenants also, like, to keep the organization independent, NATO was kept independent, or was kept independent by asking for dues from their members. And NATO had a very small budget, and their only resources was a phone and a small office in Dublin. So the interesting is as well, like that, like there's a lot of direct action that people did. Like a lot of working class women were doing pickets and protests every single day for 2 years straight. And tenants got letters from the government saying you have to pay a rent or you'll be evicted. And hundreds of tenants went to their local government building and burnt the letters outside the building. And of course, there's the rent strikes. which drove the whole thing. There's a lot of community. There's community bonds ran deep around this time. Ireland was very, very poor country at the time, and people had to depend on each other to survive. And this dependence kind of extended to evictions. There's even something that we call the siege of a housing estate. It's called Castle Court, the siege of Castle Court, where 300 police were sent to evict one old couple, and thousands of tenants fought back and won. Something that's a little bit different as well from what we have now in Spain to what was happening in Ireland. Ireland had a lot of armed groups. So the Irish Republican Army was one of the armed groups, or the IRA, and their IRA were helping NATO by protecting the money that. So NATO were, sorry, I skipped over this. NATO were taking the rent money from tenants, and they were putting it in a bank account, and the IRA would protect this money, but they also committed to defending people from police violence. So and then they won by general elections came up, and they made an agreement with the Irish Labour Party at the time to meet all of NATO's demands if NATO helped them get elected. NATO got into government, and NATO got all their demands. And yeah, this shows that there's power when working class is unified, and that it's interesting that there's been a lot of time, and the rent strike went on for 2 years during the night from 1970 to 1972. But it's interesting because it was definitely a short-term win, but when we look back on it now, we see it as a mistake was made in the agreements they made with the Labour Party, and it was a long-term loss. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Great history, and yeah, didn't last forever, the successes. So yeah, here we are again. So what should we do to like go from organizing one block to arrange strike in one country to like arrange strike in one city to arrange strike in a whole country, or maybe even, I don't know, Europe. How can we expand on the idea? What tools do we need to like go forward from the point we're in right now? Pablo, do you want to start?
Sure, I'll throw a few ideas and maybe you guys can complement. I think there's definitely some conditions that are required for rain strikes, for more general rain strikes to happen. One of them is obviously very strong community support, right? So that's why in Madrid Tenants Union, we've been launching this idea following from the tenant brigades that we were already doing in the last few years, which were like groups of people with tenant union shirts going around the streets talking to people about their tenancy issues. We're kind of rebranding that into tenant picket lines, which is basically the same groups of people who go around the streets to extend the idea to build those communities and gather that widespread support, right? So we have a visible presence in the streets, and we can see what the feeling is, right? So that people understand why the strike and understand the need for the strike, and also see it as necessary. Obviously, we don't only need to persuade tenants. Spain, like many, I guess, countries in the European Union, also has a big homeowner population. So in this tenant picket lines, we also have to talk to some of those homeowners to know that they'll be on our side if we did a general rent strike, so that they would support us and not line up with the repression, because we know there would be some sort of repression if we ever went in a further steps of a bigger strike. Apart from this strong community support that we're trying to gather with these tenant picket lines, I think another thing is definitely, like I think Jack was saying, this kind of structure test, or like small steps that we need to take before we go to something bigger, right? We can't go from 0 to 100. So we need to be very serious and methodical about like what are going to be the small steps that we're going to be taking, right? So maybe doing some localized partial rent strikes is one of the steps. Doing some demonstrations like we've been doing are some of the steps to see how much support you can gather, right? So in October and November, we saw around 100,000 people coming out in Madrid and Barcelona. We're going to have a national demo on the 5th of April that's going to be coordinated in the whole of different parts of Spain. So we'll see how many people come out there. But also things like, can we think of things like asking people to pay late their rent, to pay less, a bit less, a symbolic amount? What steps can we think to also be able to measure how much support we're gathering? Because obviously we don't want to say big things and then not have the support behind us. So yeah, I think those are some of the things: community support, structured tests of the small steps, and obviously international solidarity is crucial. Like the more we share tactics and successes across Europe, I think the stronger we become, and the stronger message we send to landlords and politicians that we're not going to accept the status quo. So I think that's why webinars like this are really important.
Okay, let me continue with that because, well, of course, I agree with everything Paulo said, but there's something also that when a tool that when you think of doing things like this, because previously when I said, and we are going to go on a strike, it sounds like, yeah, we are going to do it. Of course, there's a lot of work, a previous work, like Pablo said, going door to door, getting all the people together, organizing the block, training the people you want to, because you are not doing the strike, they are doing the strike. And it's very important that they are ready, that they know what they are facing, that they know the consequences, but that they know, and I think this is crucial, that they know you are there. They have to trust you. They're not going to go on a strike if they don't trust you, if they don't know you are there for them legally and with resources and with everything. And for this, we have a tool. I'll try to explain it because it's a bit complicated, but it sounds complicated. It's not as complicated, but it's a thing that more or less I think anyone can do. The example I had is from Catalonia, and of course I'm not going to start doing all the case, but you can also make like an economic estimation of how long you need to go on a strike to make these people have an economic heart, so they have to start to make movements. It's a thing that will help you understand who you are facing, but also it's very interesting because some of these big, we think they are so big, they have so many money, but most of these international funds that have grown so big with tenants, with renting in the last years, in fact, what they have is a lot of assets of buildings and that they are buying and selling, but this is what we call passive assets, but they don't have that much liquidity. So you can, if the people you are against is in the stock market, it's kind of easy to get the information. If not, you will have to investigate in your country what web pages and what organism you have to go and ask and get the information. But if you can get a bit of information of this company and make a bit of calculations, what do they have in passive assets, what do they have in liquidity, how much they spend per month, and with this you can calculate, okay, 80% of the tenants in this building will be a loss this big each month. So you calculate all of this, and maybe you can get 17 months. Okay, we have to make sure we in 1.5 years, these people will have to start selling assets or they will lose money. Of course, our idea is to win earlier, because 1.5 years, it's a lot of time resisting. And it doesn't mean you are going to win in 1.5 years, or it doesn't mean if you see, oh, it's 2 years, it doesn't mean you are going to lose if you don't be there because we are not going to win with this economy. We are going to win because we are together, because we are organized, because we have each other. We are going to win with that. But to be able to tell the people you want to go on a strike, see this, we have made these calculations. This gives people a lot of trust in you. They think you are very serious about this, you have their back. And also, if you are ready to go to these boring calculations for them, you're going to be with them forever. So it's not that as difficult as it sounds, I promise. So it's worth a try.
And to quickly add on what Mari was saying, when we had the October demo in Madrid, we went on a television small debate with one of the owners of one of the biggest rental agencies in Spain, which is a rental agency that prides itself in saying that they will pay the landlord their rent regardless of whether the tenant pays or doesn't pay, right? They're always guarantee the payment. And we asked them on national TV, how many months of rent strike could your agency support? And he didn't have an answer. He just got stuck on TV. So you know, there's also this part of like fear changing sides. We say this a lot now, and when we speak, you know, we want fear to change sides. We don't want to be the ones who have fear now. Let them have fear of us, like in that case. So yeah.
Jack, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I think yeah, like it's so important to empower people and also change and fear changing sides. I think that's really important. And something I'd add, I guess, is like it's important to look long term as well. Like beyond rent strikes and like for example, CATU has a goal that we're working towards, which is universal public housing, which basically means there's no need for any landlords anymore, and possibly no need for any banks. And we accept that can't happen under capitalism. It's why we're anti-capitalist in our bylaws, and that's something that needs to be seriously considered. We're doing a lot of political education, or we're starting a lot of political education training that we want to political economics or political economy training that we're going to be giving our members, and kind of breaking it down step by step how things need to go in the long term, because we don't want to end up in a situation where that like NATO did, where they get a win in the immediate term, but then 50 years down the line we're back in the exact same situation, even worse, in Ireland than we were in the 70s.
Yeah, thank you. That was exactly what I wanted to ask next. So, yeah, rent strikes are basically amazing. Like you see this and you feel the power tenants have. But nonetheless, they are just one of tools that we have, and they exist in a broader context. So, what else and what next? That would be my last question for today, and then we will take your questions. If you have some questions, please think about them, and you can write them into the chat or raise your hand. But yeah, please tell us what else and what next.
Well, I'll just share a few thoughts and then let you guys close. I mean, what else? I think for us, obviously, like you were saying, Jack, having these long-term goals are very important, but also for us, the importance of the rent strike is not just the tool itself, and it's not an end in itself. It's a means to different ends, obviously. But what a key thing that we think makes it really attractive now, or really important for this moment, is that, you know, we want to build those institutions that teach organizing methods to thousands, right? And so that the victories that we achieve also allow us to accumulate more power, because otherwise they're empty victories, right? Any victory that we win that doesn't accumulate more power to our organization is not a real victory, because it can be reversed, it can be changed, governments change, conditions change. So we need to make sure that any movements that we make are kind of growing our organization and teaching our members organizing methods that can be applied in many different situations. So I think at least now in our context, you know, organizing strikes is a good excuse as well to teach those organizing methods that to different communities, you know, so that they can take them forward. And, you know, maybe now it's a strike and tomorrow will be something else. But to get that universal public housing that you're saying, obviously we need a very strongly organized communities, right? So strikes are a good way to get people organized, I guess. I'll just close with that.
I will add to this what Pablo was saying, that as I said, we can have all the tools and we can have all the economical ideas and all the ideas we can have to promote our rents and our actions, but we only win if we learn to organize ourselves, to work collectively, to and to teach people that they can do this, that they can work together and they can have power. It's very important. And for example, one of the things that has happened this same week in Barcelona is that the people from La Caixa that are going to go on the rent strike, they went to Parliament, to the Catalan Parliament, and they were able to talk there. And for people that are working class, that some of them, they have this 9-to-5 works, and probably they had never thought they will be there talking to the politicians face to face, being able to tell them, this is our homes, we're fighting for this, but we are not only fighting for our houses, we are fighting for the public housing system that has to change. And I think this is the powerful tool we have, to show people that we have power. It has been taken from us, but we have it, and we have to keep fighting for it. And I think that what's next, as said Pablo, is to keep organizing and keep working together. And if we win these strikes, it will be very cool and very powerful. But if we not, we will learn and we will try again next year. So this is our strength.
Thank you. Okay, so two quick things I wanted to share with you. In the chat of this Zoom call, you can find a Solidarity Fund, so you can help strikes in La Caixa and Nestor by clicking the link and maybe supporting the fund. And also in the chat, you can find a brief questionnaire about this webinar, so we can learn. Did you like it? What can we improve and also be better next time? So yeah, just these two things. And now, if anyone from the audience have questions, please write them in the chat or raise your hand, and we will let you ask your question. Any question?
Hello?
Yes, David? David?
Yes, but Josh can... Well, I go ahead then. Thank you very much for the presentation. Very, very inspiring. Adelante. And I would like to know if... so I have I organize a young union of tenants union in Belgium, in the city, Charleroi. We have many different landlords. So we don't have a big social landlord. So my question is, if you want to do things, rental strike with many landlords, do you organize by landlord or by block or by street? And how many people is the minimum necessary to have some weight, to have some power, to show power? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Can someone answer. Pablo, Marie, Jack, do you want to answer?
Well, a quick thought on that, and if you guys want to add, obviously with people who rent from smaller landlords, coordinated rent strike, it's a bit trickier. When you have a big landlord that owns one or several buildings, they're kind of weaker in that sense, and you can just organize against them. I think the way we think about people who rent from small landlords is that obviously they would have to wait for this rent strike for a more generalized rent strike, right? So what we said when we were giving our spokesperson in the October 13th memo is that if enough people in one city go on rent strike, obviously you would collapse the courts. If the courts had to process thousands of eviction cases, they would collapse, and the government would either have to choose to expedite those evictions or to do something about the situation, right? So obviously the previous examples we have from the previous century are like 19,000 people in Barcelona in 1931, 20,000 or more, I think, in Glasgow in 1915. So they're big numbers. So obviously, for small landlords, the rent strike tool may not be so effective in a one-to-one case, but because the objective there is not only to negotiate with the landlord, but to create a bigger political crisis, right? So negotiation is only possible in a strike when you have a big landlord. With small landlords, maybe other strategies. It depends on also the laws in each country. Like Mari was saying, the We Stay campaign in Spain also applies to small landlords, and those are partial rent strikes. But that's because we're taking advantage of the law and of how slow the court proceedings are in Spain. So this may differ.
Thank you. Jack, Marie, do you want to add something?
No, Pablo said everything I had thought about it.
I just add something small, like if I'd organize by landlord anyway. I think that's from my experience in it. That's the best way to do it. And there's a lot of steps before rent strike that if you can get enough tenants on board to do, like sending maybe if you get like 50 to 100 emails sent to a landlord in 10 minutes, or maybe do a protest outside if they have a business, something like that. It can be very effective at getting like stuff sorted before a rent strike.
Thank you. Okay, we have Josh and then Julia. So Josh, please ask your question.
Yeah, there was a question about how do we sort of think about scaling up or imagine really large scale rent strikes. And this is kind of maybe a more abstract question. But in my mind, to have like wider spread rent strikes, maybe it's not just about like doing more rent strikes, but we also have to build like the tenant as like a political identity. And I thought it would be interesting to ask the people in this room if everyone has thoughts about how to do this, or how to, this question about how to combine tenant organizing with like broader political struggle. Because yeah, I think for widespread rent strikes, I think if we get to that point, it means that there's like broader recognition that we're in kind of like special times, like where the amount of money that's going into real estate as opposed to production now is kind of a new thing, and the way that rents have been rising is kind of unprecedented territory as well, right? So I think there's a lot of people still kind of accept that, like, oh yeah, the housing market in Berlin is shit, blah blah blah, but it's kind of like this everywhere, like in the world, and it's something that I don't think we should just accept. And so yeah, it's like how to kind of like get people to that point of the political education or whatever to get people to see that no, this isn't like kind of a normal situation, and that we have to kind of take extraordinary steps, maybe to act collectively and do something about it. So yeah, interested in people's thoughts.
I will start. Like Pablo said before, we are here in Catalonia, in Spain. We are not only organizing the blocks and the tenants, but we are also collaborating and in talks with labor unions, because we think, like you said, that this is not only a problem of tenancy, it's a economical, political problem right now, and it has to be addressed by all the society. And working hand in hand with labor unions, it's a way of it getting farther from these housing groups that maybe bigger or smaller or get more or less attention. Normally, labor unions have a different gravitas in the minds of people, and this can help. Also, I would suggest not only talk to labor unions, but to organize with neighboring associations, even if they are not into housing, with if there's people fighting touristification, work with them, because in the end it's all the same problem. And if you start working with the groups, you know each other, you realize everybody is working towards the same goal, and then you can have these big demonstrations like we had in Barcelona and in Madrid, because you can call up all the friends you have been there for in the past. So that would be my advice. Be everywhere, work with everyone that shares the same goal, like we do, for a better city for the people. And this is the way of spreading the message.
Yeah, and just to add quickly on what Mari said, I think apart from obviously the support of labor unions and the neighborhood community groups, is like, we need to make homeowners understand that the rents being up is also a problem for them, and I'm talking about homeowners who are not landlords and who maybe traditionally will side with landlords because of how the media works, but in material terms are closer to tenants than to landlords in living conditions. So in this sense, we need to go and talk to them in the streets, talk to them in their houses, be like, the rent being too high is also not good for you. You don't want your neighbors to be changing every 6 months. You don't want people crowding in apartments next to you. You don't want all these things. They're also bad for you. And in that way, to get this kind of more widespread support for potential strike situations, so that everyone in the city, in the neighborhood, kind of feels like the strike is needed. We need to make it feel very necessary before it happens.
Thank you. And we have another question from Yulia. Please ask your question.
Yes, thank you. I have actually three questions. Firstly, thank you very much for presenting. It's really inspiring. Though when I'm thinking about how it would look like in the Czech context, I was thinking that, well, firstly, there are some people who did or tried to do some sort of a rent strike, and they end up by being sued, losing the court, and being indebted because of this. So they lost their housing because they couldn't pay for it anymore. They had to move, but they also got indebted because they had to pay for the court. And they also had to pay the raised rent that they proclaimed they will not pay. So this difference they had to pay. So I wanted to ask you, how do you deal with situations like this when the tenants have to pay for the court, which they probably will lose? Because this is our situation, and this is why we also don't think in terms of the rent strike, because we will risk the lives of people who might be already quite fucked. We will risk it so much more, and we will promise that something that will never happen. They will just really lose a lot of money and housing as well. So if you have, because I know that labor unions, they have some funds that can cover the wages that they're losing, for example, or there are some sources that can provide them, let's say, food or something like this. I don't know, because for us it's a really big problem, especially in the Czech context. We have debt collectors who are connected to mafia. They're private actors, so if they like collect as big debt they collect, the bigger is their salary. So for them, when people are indebted, it's very good, and they will try to make you even more indebted than you are. So, and probably if you go rent strike, you meet these people. Then I have two also questions. One is a question to Jack. What, like, if you have some examples of materials that you use for political education, because I think it's a very complicated topic, and how to explain it to the general public and, let's say, working class people, like with like, you know, few fingers, so they understand how housing and capitalism is connected. For me, it's a big question that I don't know how to answer. And I also have a question actually to Pablo when he was speaking now, because he was speaking about homeowners, and I wanted to ask. You mentioned some examples, but for me, the question is how to bring homeowners and tenants together is essential, because in the Czech Republic, for example, in our context, we have a very small percentage. I mean, it's not that small, it's like 30%, but we have majority homeowners. So if they're against us, it's really not good. So I wanted to ask you how maybe you can tell some tactics or some discourse that you use to bring them closer, because again, in our context, the situation is that a homeowner is not a tenant, and he is very proud of not being a tenant, because tenant is a loser. So he used to be a tenant when he was a student, but now he won this neoliberal game and he bought a flat. So they really don't want to have anything in common with the tenants. And for me, it's a big question how to put them together and to make basically homeowners understand that they also are not maybe winners of capitalism necessarily.
Thank you for your questions. Do one of you want to start?
If you allow me, I will start with the first question about how do we help people with the economic charge that they can get if they get to court. That's where the Solidarity Fund enters. We shared the link in the chat. We didn't have time, either Pablo or me, to mention it as a tool before, but it's one of the main tools in any strike. Like you say, labor strike has a solidarity fund, and a rent strike has to have one too. And we have this one here. If anyone want to help, it is there. But also, for example, in the Sindicat and in Sindicato de Inquilinas, it's the same. As you know, we people pay fee in our sindicatos, so we have not only economical independence, but we also have a part of the fee that you pay goes to a solidarity fund inside the sindicato. So even if for this rent strike specifically, we've made this one special because it's going to be very big. But for these cases that I say of Enschedem, we stay. If people get to the court and they lose, the solidarity funds enter here, and these people will not get indebted. But of course, it's an economical problem, and it needs an economical solution. You don't. Also, we always try to get a solution. If we see, for example, we get to the court and we see what we are going to lose, we are always have time to tell the owner, look, we are leaving the apartment in the next month if you retire all the charges and we don't have to pay anything in court. And most of the times, the landlord just wants you to leave, and they will say, yes, please leave, and you don't have to. I retire all the charges, and you don't have to pay. So you can always talk in the last moment. There's always time for negotiation. The thing is to have the solidarity funds behind you to make sure that if this doesn't work, you can support these people. Of course, it's crucial.
And to add on what Mari was saying, apart from the specific funds, I mean, obviously, I think we need to be aware in the case of strikes that repression is going to happen, and we have to be prepared for it. And not only economic repression, which is what you're talking about, but, you know, media repression, political repression. I mean, we've already seen, but by putting the idea of the strike out there, how, you know, some parts of the media are reacting to it in a way, calling us criminals, trying to delegitimize what we're doing. So there is obviously a response. There are fascist groups in the streets that intimidate tenants who kind of fight back or who stay in their houses. So we do have a lot of these issues as well in Spain. But I mean, to stay organized is the important thing, because in the case that you were saying, I don't know the specifics of obviously your situation, but it's different to organize 10,000 people or 100,000 people rent strike than a 10 people rent strike, right? And it's different to organize people who are not able to pay, and they're not paying because they're not able to pay, than to kind of make a plan. And even though obviously we're all struggling to pay, but make a plan, a slow plan where we increase the pressure, right? Because in the first case, you know, if 10 people stop paying and we're like, oh, it's a rent strike because they can't pay, and it's not really well organized, the chances are very high that you know, we may lose, and there may be economic consequences. So that's why we've also started with this partial rent strikes that are very well thought out, that have a judicial precedent that kind of supports them, because we want to build the legitimacy to have bigger strikes. But obviously the first strike that you do, wherever you are, have to be very well supported. Because if you lose your first strikes, that will also deter people from doing more strikes later. So it's important that at least the first ones are very well prepared, I guess. That's what I would say.
Yeah, just to add to that as well, I think yeah, it's important to operate as much as you can, without going on rent strike. Well, to build up to it slowly but surely, and then make sure you have like a huge majority of people. So again, the courts are getting clogged up, like Maria was saying, but then also having a militant kind of organization that can defend itself against like the fascists and debt collectors. So yeah.
Yeah, there were two additional questions about how to talk to homeowners, and do you have any tips for political education? So Pablo and Jack, if you can answer these questions.
Okay, quick on homeowners. I think you guys, depending on what the situation is in your country and what the general sense is, I mean, but just have organizing conversations with people, and this means listening to people, not telling them all these other the issues that tenants are facing, because obviously maybe at first homeowners are going to be like, why do I care? But asking them, you know, how has the neighborhood changed since you've lived here? Are you happy with these changes? You know, why has this happened, do you think? Do you think this is, you know, and trying to slowly show them that obviously rising rents, landlords are the problem, right? So it's hard and it's tricky to have these organizing conversations, and a lot of them will point at the wrong targets and the wrong problems, but we need to continuously engage in those conversations, because if we don't do that, there's already people who are doing this, and it's the extreme right, and they're doing it very well everywhere. So we have to, that's our task now. We have to go and talk to people and convince them, and it's very hard to convince people, but we have to do that that work.
Yeah, political education. Well, it's something very new. It's the way we're doing it. We're not like going out and holding public meetings and being like, death to capitalism. We're like we're developing a program to like educate people the most involved in the union, people on the committees and the different branches, so they can integrate what they learn into all the conversations they have with tenants, and also to help develop, like with the homeowners, trying to develop new ways to talk to people, and constantly improving like the methods we have for convincing people to get on board and to improve, and spread the movement really. The right now they're like, we have a few members who have gone over to to London on a course, a trademark is what they're called, and they're creating a whole weekend long program, where half of it's going to be political economic education. That'll be like talking about the history of Ireland and kind of the land struggles of Ireland, and then the other half will be organising education, like how do you put all this knowledge into practice in your organising to get power.
Yeah, thank you. Who is organizing this course? Jack, can you tell?
Trademark, TRADE, Mark, MARK. They're bringing lots of different organisations from across Ireland and the UK together to develop political economic courses for trade unions and community organisations.
Thank you. Okay, thank you all for being here, for all your questions. Thank you to our speakers today, Pablo, Jack, Marie. Thank you for sharing your information about your unions, about your experiences and your history. Is there anything you would like to add before we close today? Okay, so
Up the union.
thank you. So I will just remind you that you can click two links in the chat. First is Solidarity Fund link, and the second one is a quick questionnaire so we can know what we can do better. And yeah, that would be it for today. Thank you all for joining. Thank you again for being with European Action Coalition for the Right to Housing and to the City today. And I hope we will see each other again pretty soon. Yeah, thank you.